Good afternoon, everyone. So for everyone who's in the room this afternoon, please take advantage of the real coffee and the real snacks. For those of you on the webcast, please take advantage of the virtual coffee and the virtual snacks. So my name is Rick Hegley, and I am the chair of this esteemed department, Laboratory Medicine and Pathobiology. And the topic of this afternoon's workshop is on senior academic promotions. So at the University of Toronto, the concept of senior academic promotions means to the rank of associate professor or full professor. And what we are hoping to achieve from this workshop is to demystify some of the myths that are circulating out there in terms of, some medieval type process where, people do secret handshakes, and all this kind of stuff, and to actually show that the university promotions process is quite involved, detailed, and ultimately intended to be fair. Now, what has happened over the years is we continue to learn from promotion cycles every year, and these lessons that we learn then get translated for ever increasing improvement to make the promotions process as smooth and as successful as possible for everyone involved. And without any further ado, I would like to invite the chair of the Decanal Promotions Committee. So that is the committee that oversees all of the promotions for the entire Faculty of Medicine, all departments. And it's a happy accident that the chair of the Decanal Committee is also a card-carrying member of LMP. That's Professor Avram Gottlieb. So Avram, I'd like to turn it over to you to give us an overview as to how the senior promotions process works at the Faculty of Medicine level, and then we will continue with departmental type specifics and hopefully have adequate time for discussion and making sure you get the information that you need. So thanks very much. Over to you, Avram.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation to talk to you. So I have a set of slides which are divided into two parts. The first part really tells you how the promotions committee works and gives you some idea of the activities that we're involved with and what the process is as we go through our deliberations. And the second one will be on CPA. And again, I think probably CPA you're going to be talking more about. And I'm going to stay here for the duration so I can interact with folks at that level as well. I have about 20 minutes, so I'm going to move quickly through this. But you should be able to pick up the important points. So this is me, and the key thing is just my email. So if anybody does want to contact me about anything that's in here or anything else, I'm very happy to talk to people. I give these kinds of talks to different departments, and if an individual has something they'd like to talk to me about, I'm happy to do that. And sometimes I may, of course, if I feel it's not appropriate, will refer them to the appropriate person within the faculty. So the Decanal Promotions Committee, we have two committees because we have lots of dossiers. This year we had 133, so they were divided into two committees. I chair both committees. Each committee has a provostial assessor that's assigned by the provost and represents the provost around the table. And then there are members from the faculty who are either at the professor, associate professor level. These members are appointed by the dean in conjunction with chairs to reflect faculty diversity. So we try to get representation from all the different arms of the faculty where we have about 27 departments. So obviously not everybody could be represented, but over a number of years, every department gets a chance. And the terms for each individual are 3-year terms. So you serve for 3 years, and then you will be given a nice little memento, and off you go. So the other members of the committee include an administrator from Human Resources, and this whole process goes through Human Resources. So the most important administrative individuals is Libby Sheriff, who works with me on this particular project and handles all the administration for the committee. And then the individual administrators in each of your departments who interact with Libby pretty much all year round, asking questions, trying to understand sometimes new things that we're bringing forward, etc. The whole process is strictly confidential, and that goes to the committee members, to myself, etc. And we're advisory to the dean. So basically, at the end of the day, after our deliberations, we provide the dean with 2 lists. One list which we say we feel these people should be promoted, and one list where we indicate that we don't support promotion. And then it's up to the dean to look at what we present to him. In this case, it used to be her, but now it's him, and basically make a final decision. So therefore, everything is confidential. So people may say, oh, well, you met, so you know who is going to be promoted or not. Well, the answer to that is no. We make a recommendation, but the final say is the dean, and the dean usually will communicate with the chair of the department, and the chair will then communicate with the individual, and as we indicate in a moment, you'll see that there is an appeal process. If you fail to get promoted, there is an appeal process, but that appeal process deals between the candidate and the dean. We ask that members of the committee not serve on departmental promotions committee. There might be a bit of a conflict here, but after you come off the committee, by all means, oftentimes people go on to a department committee because they have some experience. And we also ask the members of the promotions committee not to provide internal referee letters because, again, there are issues around conflict. So the provostial assessor, the rigor with which the criteria for promotion are applied is something that the assessor looks at. And he or she pays strict attention to the requirements for promotion from the university and the faculty, and make sure that all the procedures are being followed correctly. And at the end of the day, the assessor has to assure the provost that best practices were indeed followed by the committee in both the preparation of the material and also in the review of the files. The assessor, again, will pay attention to issues around conflict of interest, especially in referee letters. And the assessor is not a voting member of the committee, but from time to time will make comments while we are deliberating, and at the end of the day send some kind of a evaluation to the provost. So what is conflict of interest? And now this focuses on the members of the Decanal Promotions Committee. So if you're from the same department, obviously it's a conflict. If you're from the same hospital, it's okay. So we're running with conflicts of interest based on departments and not hospitals. If you've had obviously close collaborations, past or present, and in general, as you'll see for referees, it's a collaboration in the past 5 years, such as a common grant or a common publication, etc. And clearly, if there's a potential for a career advancement relationship. So that's a broad issue, but I think most people will understand what that means. And with respect to conflict of interest, even for the Decanal Committee, If you feel you have a conflict, then you should behave as though you have one. So even if you're not 100% certain, you should behave as though you have one. And for conflict of interest, that means that the member of the committee steps out during the deliberations. The only person that doesn't step out is myself. So when LMP comes up, I appoint another chair of the committee. I'm silent, stone face, not, no cheering or anything. But I'm there just to make sure that there isn't some kind of a procedural issue. It hasn't happened yet, but sometimes something might come up, and I don't feel it's fair to disadvantage LMP or any department in which the chair is the chair of the committee. So I'm there for those purposes. Now, again, conflict of interest going into issues around close personal relationships are another thing that you have to consider and feel that you have a conflict. So even though it may not look like you have a conflict, if you yourself, as a member of the committee, look at a candidate coming forward and saying, for whatever reason, and you don't have to give the reason, I think I'm conflicted with this individual, you step out of the room. And we also ask members of the Decanal committee not to submit referee letters. So external and internal referees, this comes up very often from departments and from individuals. And it's best to just basically follow the rules. External referees are individuals of appropriate rank or equivalent external to the U of T or its hospitals. So when we say appropriate rank, if you're going to full professor, the referees have to be full professors. If you're going to associate, they have to be at least associate. They can be full as well, of course. Normally, external referees are drawn from well-regarded national and international universities or equivalent. External referees should be individuals of the highest stature who are able to judge the quality and the impact of the candidate's academic work and scholarly activity. So the key thing, really, the one key question that one is asking the external is, you as an external are an expert in your field, you come from a distinguished university, we want you to tell us what is the quality and the impact of the candidate's work. Usually it's research and CPA. Teaching is a bit harder because most of these people will not have heard the person teach or interacted that way, but they see what the record shows for sure. So that's what we're using the external referee for. And the higher, the higher caliber the referee is, the better off you are. And going to the best universities, however you want to frame that, is also in your best interest. And if you're going for international, for a full professor, their international recognition is important. So the expectation is that you're going to have referees from the international community as well. You don't need national ones, but you certainly need international ones if you're going to full professor. And even at associate, some people feel an international referee will be a little more removed and may be useful to the candidate. The internal referees, again, are individuals who are at the University of Toronto or the hospitals who are usually neither full nor cross-appointed members of the candidate's department. However, because we have some very large departments and it becomes difficult for some departments to actually find internal referees from other departments who have some knowledge, we have compromised here and say where departments are comprised of more than 3 divisions or the equivalent of divisions, the internal referee may be solicited from another division or equivalent within the same department. So basically in medicine, if you're in cardiology, you can get letters of reference from, say, respirologists or GI folks in that kind of thing. The internal referee provides the university perspective, so it's a little bit different than the external. The internal referee may not necessarily be an expert in your field, but really saying, okay, you're a colleague of mine at the University of Toronto, and I'm looking at your CV, and do I feel that based on my knowledge of the university and how things run, that you reached the bar. So they give the university and faculty perspective on the assessment, and they put the academic and scholarly work in a university slash faculty context. So they do have a different role. Again, internals must be free of conflict. Reviewers are asked to ensure that the dossier does not show evidence of conflict of interest. So we really do ask the reviewers when they go through your dossiers to be careful. We ask the departments, of course, to do that initially, but sometimes things fall through the cracks. There's a lot of names, and sometimes they do. So we will pick that up and then flag it, and we'll talk a little bit about deferrals in a moment. So the letter of recommendation to the dean, that's really the most important aspect, and that's filled out by the chair. And why is it important? Well, first of all, it tells the committee what the chair, and when we talk of the chair, we also mean the Department Promotions Committee. Usually they're both on side. So what they think of the candidate with respect to the areas that the university looks at, which are research, creative professional activity, and teaching and education. And basically, to get promoted, you need to be excellent in one and competent in at least another. So oftentimes, members of the Decanal Committee will actually read these letters first to give them kind of an overview, almost like a hypothesis. Well, the department, the chair says this guy is as excellent in this and that. And then they would read the rest of the file and say, well, you know what? Yeah, I agree, or based on what I'm seeing, I don't quite agree with that. So therefore, it's very important that the letter of recommendation to the dean is very strong, really is not just a repetition of the file, but will add certain things, put things into context of a department specifically, and also address issues, as you'll see in a moment, which come up during in the file, which need addressing, and we'll hear that in a moment. And we do ask the chairs and the promotions committees and the departments to use the term excellent or competent. And as I mentioned, it's one excellent. You have to have at least one excellent in either research, CPA, teaching and education, and competent in one other. So the review process, a brief oral presentation is made by each of the two reviewers of the candidate's dossier. Both reviews are equal. It's not a 1 and a 2. It's really you're being reviewed by two people who have intimate knowledge. And just remembering that since we went to Laserfiche, everything's electronic, so everybody has their laptops, and they're following and looking at your CV as well as it's being discussed. So in the last couple of years, there's actually a better evaluation of all the CVs because not just the two reviewers, but other members will look at different parts of the CV, and as they hear something in the description, they will focus down, oh, I don't quite understand. So they have a better grasp of the dossiers. Now, summary of the individual's contribution, the committee members provide that in the three areas, and will comment on administrative activity, but administrative activity is not one of the criteria for promotion. Attention is drawn to strengths and weaknesses, including problem areas, and that's what I say. It's very important to look at the problem areas. And oftentimes a problem area is something in the letters of reference that we get back or letters from students that highlight something which is oftentimes not flattering, let's put it this way. And so therefore, the first thing we ask is, did the chair and the department see this letter, and are they commenting about this? And usually they do, and they say, oh, we read it, we maybe investigated something, or this is clearly an outlier, you know, those two individuals perhaps just never didn't see eye to eye, or whatever. But they address the issue. Sometimes it could be more than just addressing, and we'll put it into a deferral framework. But we won't let anything go through and say, you know, oh, this must have been this and that. We need to see the evidence to show us that whatever it is being addressed is acknowledged by the department, and the department feels that this is not a major issue. And again, as we say, referee or student letters may be problematic, so they have to be flagged. And recognition, we look for recognition in the chair's letter. And then we do have a general discussion by members. And the discussion will obviously vary in time. Some of the dossiers are pretty straightforward, and there's really not a lot of discussion. It's well written, and they meet the criteria. Others require a little more discussion. But generally speaking, we don't, you know, stay on a file forever and ever. So the committee has to make a decision. And at this first meeting of the committee, as you'll see in a moment, the decision is either promote or defer. So here we go. We ask the reviewers to state their final recommendation, and we also ask them to give us a recommendation before they walk in the door. And that's really to make sure that they've all done a really thorough job and are willing to stick their neck out on something. And they all do that very well. And then we don't hold them to this because it's really a consensus activity. So as people begin to speak and talk about the files, sometimes things come up which people, even reviewers, may not have been totally aware of. They may be not aware completely in this particular field what this and that means. But having a nice diverse group around the table makes it much easier to come to a consensus. And I think for the 133 files this year, I think there were about 5 where we didn't have a consensus. Consensus means everybody agrees one way or the other. And then we vote, so promote, defer, and if we indicate defer, we list what additional information is requested. Now this to me is one of the really good things about the process we have. What it says is we've read your file and we look at it, and there's lots of stuff in here, but there's not enough for us to make a decision about to promote. Doesn't say we're making a decision not to promote, but we feel that we need more information. So number one, we allow you, as you'll see in a moment, to provide more information. And we actually even allow you to provide information until the day that the committee sits. So just because you submitted something a year ago and you've published now 3 more papers, we want to know about those. We want them listed because that's going to be to your benefit. And we know some departments like medicine, huge department, they're starting their promotions like a year in advance. So obviously there'll be new stuff which we need to know. And then sometimes in the file it'll say, well, so-and-so has just started a program or is 1 year into the program. So we'd like a little update because it's hard for us to make a decision as to the value of the program. Okay, so now let's see. The deferral of promotion is where there is insufficient information and documentation to recommend promotion. It doesn't mean not promote, it just means we can't make that decision right now. The committee and primarily the assigned reviewers provide clear comments that compose a set of questions which a chair is asked to address in the deferral letter, which we send the chair, which is sent to the departmental chair. The department chair works with the candidate, and they must do that, and the department promotion committee chair to address the request of the deferral letter. So this becomes a very important process, and I think we're pretty good in doing this very quickly. So we meet, and the following day these deferral letters go. We stay late into the evening to get these deferral letters set up, and we don't leave any candidate until we have the questions for the deferral letter and that all the committee members agree. So it's not something where we kind of remember what was. It's all there before we go on to the next file. So in March, the assigned reviewers lead the discussion and review the new submitted information when the department chair attends the deferral meeting. And usually now the custom has been, in many departments, not all, the department chair comes with the chair of the department promotions committee. Sometimes one of them speaks, sometimes both of them speak. It's really up to how a department behaves. And the meeting is usually a 30-minute meeting, one or two with the committee, 10 minutes for a presentation orally, 10 minutes for us to ask some questions, and then 10 minutes for us to deliberate. Now, in the interim, from whenever it is, mid-February to towards the end of March, that's when the departments work on the material and answer the questions. And then a few days before the committee is set, these answers are brought forward to the committee electronically on Laserfiche. And usually that works very well. The chair also has the opportunity, if there's some late-breaking news or there was something, they could bring material, and we'd ask them to bring copies for everybody at the meeting as well. So we're trying to get everything in that possibly can be presented to the committee. Now, just in the deferral letters, we're not asking the department and the candidate, et cetera, to say, not to repackage their dossier. We want new information that we didn't see. We don't want the committee or the chair to say, I don't understand why you guys didn't understand this, so here it is again, and we hope you understand it this time. That's not going to work. So obviously, the committee does look at the files very carefully, is aware of everything, and then they're looking for new information. And we'll see what it is. So these are some of the examples of deferral statements. The deferral letter is very brief. Really, it would be something like this, bullet points. And what we say is, for instance, insufficient information to promote. So additional evidence of excellence in CPA. Inadequate evidence of national impact and invites additional information. Noted a gap in productivity and asked for clarification. Requests any additional information regarding new publications or submissions. The dossier lacked sufficient documentation of impact of the research. So impact is a very, very important aspect, both of research, of teaching, of CPA. So it's fine you did it, but the important thing is what is the impact of what you did. And to get to a level of excellence, one is looking clearly of an impact that's quite above average. So now, as I mentioned, Decanal Promotions Committee recommendations reported to the dean by the chair, in this case myself, and the dean will review how he or she sees fit very thoroughly, and clearly the ones where we don't recommend promotion, they're going to look at it very carefully, interrogate myself on behalf of the committee as to why we chose that route. And then usually the dean will communicate with the chair and then down to the candidate. And as I mentioned, there is an appeal mechanism in place which a candidate may utilize after receiving a denial of promotion. Okay, so I'm gonna, how am I doing for time? Like, Okay, so I'm gonna stop here, and you have, the next part is really the CPA, so I'll hang around, and if you want me to input at some point. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm good, so thank you very much.
All right, so Avron's given a background of what goes on at the Decanal level. And but I'm Kathy Struker, I'm the chair of the Department Promotions Committee. So this is where your dossier comes before it ends up with Avron. So I'm giving a perspective on what we do, but also about how to put your paperwork together. So this is our overall learning objectives for this session. So as Avram said, I'm not going to spend too much time. We've obviously got a bit of overlap, but we want you to show that you've created some level of excellence in either research, CPA, or teaching education. And you have to be at least competent in one of the other areas. And this is the promotions committee, just to show you that it's quite a variety of people. It's got MDs, it's got PhDs, people from different areas in LMP, people from different hospitals. And this allows us to have people who may not be experts in the area that you are in, but at least there's people who can speak to the impact of what you've done. And it makes it easier to assess things if we have a variety of people in the group. And we also don't want to make it look like we're some secretive little group hiding in a corner and doing stuff in a mysterious way. So again, correlating with what Avram spoke about, when you're looking at scholarship, for one thing, you have to show a degree of independence. So this is also important for people who are thinking forward, maybe not applying for a promotion in this current cycle. But when you finish with your fellowship or you finish with your postdoc, you have to separate yourself from your supervisor in your postdoc, because otherwise you end up looking like a little mini-me, and nobody can tell whether it's you doing the work or your previous supervisor who's giving you all the ideas. So you have to find some way to separate yourself. That doesn't mean you never work with that person ever again once you're past working with them, but you have to find some degree of separation. Also, what they're looking for is originality and innovation, and it's particularly in CPA. What are you doing that's different? What are you doing that's changing how the profession works? And as Avram said, impact is all. Nobody cares if you've written papers. I've had people come and complain to me, well, nobody thinks I can get promoted, but I've written 30 or 40 papers. It's not relevant unless those papers have done something. Anybody can publish 30 case reports, but if those 30 case reports have just gone out there and vanished without a single citation or anything, you have no idea what the impact is. There probably is no impact, and it doesn't mean anything. So if you've got papers, you have to tell us, what is the impact? We've had dossiers where there were things buried in the citations where somebody said, well, but I did this. And we're like, well, you didn't tell us that. We have a lot of variety on the committee, but we do not have people who are experts in every area of research, education, and every area of LMP. So if you wrote a paper a while ago that did something big in the field, there's no guarantee that the committee will know. So you have to think, what did I do and what impact did I have? And you have to tell us. Don't assume that we're going to read through your citations and go, oh, look what this person did. That's not our job. It's your job to write your dossier in a way that emphasizes what you've done. This is at the end, but it's not a time to be humble. It's not a time to lie, but it's not a time to be humble. So you don't want to exaggerate, but you want to say, this is what I did. And again, as Avram said, national impact for associate professor. What did you do outside of Toronto, outside of Ontario, that had some kind of impact? And how important was it? This is just some background in terms of our promotions, that we've actually had quite a few people getting promoted, both to associate professor and full professor. Our number is actually pretty decent. And they've gone through on a number of different pathways. I'm not sure who this unknown person is, or two or three people. We actually don't know how they got promoted, which is, maybe it just goes back far enough that we don't know where their dossier is. Not sure. For full professor, you can see the numbers are a little lower, but then the numbers were overall lower for professor going forward on teaching. A lot of people go forward on a combination of teaching and CPA or just CPA. Research and CPA and teaching is only one person. It's unusual to have that degree of a mixed thing. Research and CPA, and of course, because we have a lot of PhDs in our group, there's quite a few people who go forward purely on research. So it just reflects what's going on in our department. Excellence in research is, I think, easiest for people to understand, both for us and probably also for the Decanal committee. Everybody understands people getting a PhD, people writing papers, and people getting grants. When you get grants, though, what they also want to see is sustained research funding, not, I got a grant 5 years ago and I haven't had anything since. That's going to pull off all kinds of warning bells. So you have to show that you've had sustained research funding, and you have to also discuss your role. Principal investigator, co-PI, what things are you applying for, or what grants are coming in your pipeline. But then obviously, you also have to talk about publications, peer-reviewed journals. Obviously, the higher impact factor, the better. Book chapters and editorials are always good. The other things that could be important are you a reviewer or an editor for any kind of journal? That can be useful. Again, independence from your former supervisor. You cannot be a clone of your previous supervisor. And again, impact, both the impact factor for the journals that you're publishing in and numbers of citations. These things are really easy to get now on Google Scholar, and you can get your impact factors, your H factors from that, showing how many of your papers have been published how many times. It's very useful to document that. Your reputation also comes up. This is obviously through all the other areas, but reputation in research would be invited presentations, and not at some little podunk meeting in I don't know where, but look for the big, you want to be invited to the big meetings if you can, obviously. Are you there for a keynote lecture, a visiting professorship? On the medical side, are you presenting at medical grand rounds or some kind of educational session outside of your center? What are you doing that shows that people know who you are, and that's not just your friends inviting you? Well, it can be, sure, but it's nicer if it's actually a bit removed so that somebody's inviting you because of your reputation. So it's not only where you went, but sometimes it's useful to say, this is how I got invited to be here. And that's the same for committees as well. How did you get invited? Were you the only transfusion medicine person in town, and so that's how you ended up on that committee? Katerina's laughing. Or were you so well recognized as a transfusion medicine that's how Katerina got invited to be on a committee? Are you invited to help organize meetings? Are you invited to be on editorial boards? Are you on grant review committees or other scientific committees? All of these are important because they reflect how much people know you, how much people respect you. What are you doing that makes you known in your field? So when you're doing your research documentation, it's very important to have a detailed research statement, and this goes back to the online web CV. You want to tell a story here. It's not just, this is what I did. Why are you doing it? How are you doing it? Who are you working with to do it? Tell a story about your research, and it doesn't have to be a long story, but it needs to make sense with what you're doing. And then you want to use all the links that you have in Web CV to link to this, to support this. So obviously, all your meetings, abstracts, all the other stuff supports with that. Your 5 most significant publications, pick them out and say why they're important. Not just because you like them the best, or maybe it's because this was your major senior author publication and everything changed because of that. But you have to think of what your most significant publications were and why they're significant. And again, you have to write a little statement about why it is the most significant publication. So these are the key messages, again, just to remind you. If you're going on mainly research, grants are huge. What is your current and past funding? Are you getting consistent funding going forward? Publications, preferably in top tier, preferably as either the first author or the senior author. A bunch of co-authored papers are not going to cut it. Then you're just somebody lost in the group, and it's not going to make any impact. You're just somebody that's there. It's not going to help too much. Presentations, again, the bigger the better. Also, if you're somebody who's a research person who has grad students, how many grad students? At what level are your grad students? Did they finish? Did they go off and do something great somewhere else? How successful are your students once they've left? And that's also, to a large extent, true for teaching. If you've had fellows and they've gone off to become famous or at least had an impact somewhere else, that can also be useful. CPA, creative professional activities. This is something that I think is particularly important for the MDs going forward, because this is a lot of what we're doing. A lot of us do not have research at the level of the PhD groups because we just don't have the funding. So that doesn't mean we don't have impact. A lot of the time, the impact that we're having is in what we're doing either on committee work, in guiding the profession, or in our clinical research papers where we've published something that has been picked up and used possibly in other people's research or in trials, or it's being used to change how we sign out cases or something like that. But you have to think of what that is, and you have to be organized. CPA, when you're writing your CPA file in your web CV, you have to sort of think of an overall arching theme, or maybe a couple of themes, but don't go more than 3, because then that really starts looking diffuse. So you pick one thing where you think you made a difference, but make it a top, like don't say, I discovered this one stain for this, and this is what it does. Talk about that tumor overall and how you've changed how to diagnose that tumor, or something like that. Have an overall theme. Talk about how you identified what was needed. What did you do to investigate it, and go forward from that? So you're trying to talk about what you did. I would strongly recommend, when you're writing your CPA portion of your dossier, look at the U of T wording. I'm never one to say, well, buzzword bingo is a good thing, but sometimes if you can look at the terminology and try to see how what you've done fits in with this terminology. And then you can kind of use this back so that the Decanal committee and our committee knows where you're coming from. You know, one of the main things here is you're looking for new techniques, conceptual innovations. Did you start up an education program within or outside of the university that has made a huge impact on how people do things? Have you changed into, this is more on the teaching side, but teaching and CPA can overlap quite a lot. New health programs, did you invent something? Did you do a new technique or a new methodology in looking at any kind of tissues, process, whatever, that changed how we do it? You're really looking for something new in this category that's creative and innovative and changes how people do things. So that's the first category. The second category is contributions to the development of professional practices. And this is, again, leadership in the profession. For me, it was really, we started doing gastric HER2 testing at St. Mike's, and it ended up being such a new thing that I got invited to go give talks across Canada to pathologists and the clinical groups about how to do this and why we did this. So that was considered leadership. But you also can be involved in things like professional organizations like the College of American Pathologists, true, but you know, within Canada as well. Are you involved in government or regulatory agencies that influence standards or enhance the effectiveness of the discipline? So a lot of these cover a variety of areas, but you know, if you're involved in consensus conference statements, again, what we want to see is not that, oh, you're sitting around a table with 20 other people and you just sat there with your mouth shut. What we want to see is, what did you do? How did you get on that committee, and what did you do? So, okay, you were on a standards or consensus conference. You need to say, I took responsibility for creating this document and I led the discussion for this. So, you know, sometimes that's a little vague because things are so consensus, but it does tell you going forward that if you're on any of those committees, find something that you can be responsible for, that you can honestly say, I did this. The last one is exemplary professional practice. This one is I think, a little difficult to show that you are leading the profession just by how you act. One of the things that can be useful here is a consultation practice. Are you getting consultations from outside your local hospitals? Are you getting national or international consults? Are people asking you how to do things? So it may not be that you've done something absolutely new, but it may be that you're just so good at what you do that people are asking you to help them. And that, again, is useful. And this is also probably where you'd put things like medical legal consultations, that you know what's going on in this certain thing, and that also would be an area. So again, it's not just, I did this 5 years ago and therefore I deserve this. It has to be sustained and current activity. It has to be something that's been going on long term. It overall has to show at least excellence, but hopefully creativity and innovation, but impact. We keep coming back to that impact, not just what you did, but how did it affect people? How did it change things? So you really have to show that whatever activity you're putting down there has changed policy making, decision making, or clinical practice at a national or international level. Documentation here is key. Again, in your web CV, there is a way to link whenever you're entering abstracts, presentations, and papers. At the bottom it says link to CPA activity. So create your CPA activities and create those links to them, because then when the committees, both our committee and the Decanal committee, get your dossier, they go, okay, this person is saying, I did this CPA activity, and here's the list of all the things that support that CPA activity. So you want to have all of these things clearly linked. And again, what was your contribution? How did you get on that committee? What did you do? If you have other supporting documentation that may not go into web CV in a convenient manner, that's also something where you can just submit it in paper form, something like a media report. You were asked in it to do an interview by the CAP paper or any newspaper. Did you write an editorial? Because editorials reflect the fact that you are an opinion maker or someone who is known to do that area, whatever you asked to write the editorial about. Is there any evidence of proof of adoption outside of the U of T committee? So that would mean letters of support from colleagues and community agencies, but preferably not just your buddy out in Vancouver who says, oh yeah, I like what you're doing, I'm doing it. You need to show that it's at a group level, that this hospital changed what they're doing because of what you said. So it can't just be one person saying this. Okay, and that goes back to this, change an organization rather than one person's practice. Are you a leader or are you a participant? Are you a driver or are you just a passenger in whatever organization you're having? You are allowed to solicit letters of support from colleagues, even if they don't qualify as referees. If you've published with them, then you can't be a full referee, but you could still get a support letter from those colleagues. Teaching, going on teaching alone, I think is still difficult at U of T. You have to show significant and high quality contributions over a long period of time. It's a lot more difficult to show national and international level teaching impact here. If you show sustained excellence in teaching for more than 10 years, you can be considered without having a national or international impact. But this doesn't mean teaching residents and maybe a fellow or two over 10 years. This means a lot of work. This means taking on courses, probably modifying courses, doing new things with courses, and if you're really energetic, writing about them, write it up. What did you do? What did you change? How did it change the way we teach people? So it's not just sitting with residents every week or one or two grad students and you're done. With any luck, you can show innovation. How did you change this course for the better and what impact did it have? And again, impact. We're going to get tired of that. Did you win any teaching awards? Also, do you have any letters of, spontaneous letters from residents or students that say how great you are? Those are always nice. Did you do some form of education leadership, either in the Faculty of Medicine in LMP or at the hospital level? it's not just for average teachers. You're not going to get through as somebody who's just sitting there doing ordinary things. It's not going to cut it. Again, innovation is going to be educational curriculum development, textbooks perhaps, syllabi, computer programs. Now with the onset of online teaching modules, that's a fairly new thing, and it's difficult to establish impact. You can try to determine the number of views of whatever video you got online. A little more difficult because it's newer. Okay, I think we covered all of that. You also need to write a teaching philosophy statement. And again, this is a story. What do you think of teaching? Why do you teach, and why do you teach in the way that you do? Tell a story about why you do it. It's not just facts, it's how you started doing it, why you do it, and why you think you made an impact. So what are your long-term goals? Were you involved with any of the U of T centers? You really have to make it clear what you're doing in teaching and why. Try to summarize it again for all the different levels at which you teach. And again, this is a lot of work in WebCV, but you have to do it. This is a horrifying amount of, well, it's not so much paperwork, but electronic documentation is extensive. And it does take a lot of time. Teaching evaluations, you'll have to go back every year and try and collect as many teaching evaluations as you can. Again, the unsolicited thank you letters you can photocopy and submit in paper or electronic PDFs. Any kind of teaching award is very useful. So it's not just what you've done, it's how much you've done, how well you've done it, and what impact you've had again. So preparing your promotion dossier, as I said, it is an intimidating amount of work. And a lot of times, if you haven't had your WebCV reasonably up to date, it's going to be particularly heavy on the information entry. Do a lot of links in WebCV and in your CPA dossier. This really, really helps support your story. Your referees, you have to suggest 3 internal and 3 external referees. And again, as Avram said, at or above the level to which you're seeking promotion. We have had some comments from internal referees who don't always understand, especially in pathology and the smaller subspecialties, when they're looking at your publications, they don't always understand that many of our journals have low impact factors just because the groups who are buying those journals are small. So we've had comments sometimes from referees saying, wow, this person has never published in a high impact journal. And then when we write our letters, we say, this person has published in their subspecialties high impact journal. So there are ways to comment on that when we write the letters. And again, 3 external ones, it doesn't have to be people you know personally, but it should be people that would understand your work and would understand the importance of your work. 3 trainees that would give references for you. Sorry, areas where we've had problems is, as I said at the beginning, lack of information. We can't tell if you don't tell us. We go through your dossiers as best we can, and so does the Decanal committee, but if you don't make it clear, it's really not our job to make the story for you. You have to make your own story about why you should be promoted. If you don't put all the information in the WebCV, then no one's going to see it. If you have an unfocused dossier or lack of direction, that's where people just put everything down and think that the overall slam of the giant CV landing on somebody's desk should do it. You have to show your themes, you have to show your direction, and you have to show, again, what your impact has been. So find a focus in whatever area you're primarily going on. Find a focus and go with that. Research, again, the problems we've had is lack of sustained productivity. And a lot of this, remember, it's what you've done since your last promotion. So if you did something when you first started as an assistant professor, when you're going for full professor, no one cares. Unless you can make a story about how it took a long time for whatever you did then to be recognized, like 10 or 15 down the road, everybody's saying, well, that was the most important paper ever in this area. So if it's been before your last promotion, it gets much more difficult to say that that has an impact. So keep that in mind when you're picking your most significant publications. If you haven't got any current or future funding on the research side, it's going to be a problem. Again, if you haven't got impact, either by publications, presentations, or committee work, it's not going to go over very easily. If your grad students haven't yet finished, it's a better argument if you can get some people through and finish their defenses. Impact of papers. We've had some discussions about citations versus downloads. Downloads, it's still in the young stages of what that actually means consequence-wise. Like, does that mean you have impact? Are people just downloading it and throwing it out, or are they actually changing their practice? It's much harder to support that yet. I think it's coming, but I don't think we're there yet. It's more difficult. Again, with CPA, impact, we've had a lot of discussion with candidates who keep saying, well, I'm on all these committees, but they don't say how they got there. Like the chief of the health committee in Ottawa said they needed me specifically and I was the only possibility, versus, well, I was the only one around, so that's how I ended up there. So you need to say how you got on and what your role is. If you have bad teaching evaluations on the teaching side, that's going to hurt. If you are doing remediation, make sure that it's commented on somewhere in your dossier, somewhere in your report. Actually, I think the university has a mechanism now so that if you have a resident that you're going to give a bad or failing evaluation to, you can actually tell the university, and any bad evaluation coming back from that resident or student will be taken into consideration, as it could be a revenge scoring. So keep that in mind, that if you have a bad evaluation, you need to address it and say why you think that happened. If you don't have a way of explaining that away, then that's not going to look good if you're going primarily on teaching. Yeah. Yeah. The chair would have to look at that. But if you know, like looking, you might have an idea and say, like, so if you have a group of things and one of them is bad, you could say, well, I don't know for sure, but I had a resident in that time period, and this may have affected my reviews. But it's, again, something you can't just hide in the back and pretend it didn't happen. People will see them. They are always going to see them. So you have to have that in there, and you have to have, if you have an explanation, try to explain it. It will hurt, for sure. Referees, we've had some problems with referees who are not arm's length. So Patricia starts off, and as Avram said, the Decanal committee also looks, does that person's last name end up in your resume, but it's just hidden in an abstract way back. Referees sometimes are too busy and won't write you a letter, so we have a bit of a runaround. I mean, it's not your fault, that just happens. This is kind of in here out of context, but don't be humble. Find somebody at a high enough level that you think will understand and will write you a good letter. It doesn't have to be a best friend, and actually sometimes it's better that it's not a best friend, because if we end up with a letter saying something like this, or my dear friend and colleague, that doesn't come off as arm's length. That comes off as, I asked my buddy to write a letter and they wrote me a really nice letter, which is lovely, but that's a colleague letter. It's not a referee letter. So think about who you're asking. Don't ask your best buddy, or if you're going to ask your best buddy, the letter comes from the department. So yeah, you can't just say, well, don't write that. But just be careful, okay? Think of who you're asking, and it can be important. The people in internal ones, again, think of who is in perhaps an associated department. So for me, I was thinking about gastroenterologists and surgeons. Who's in an associated department that would understand what you do? And again, if there's someone who you think is really important to write a letter for you that is not quite arm's length, ask them to write a colleague letter. That still tells the committee that, okay, this isn't a referee, but there is somebody out there who thinks you're important. So because of all this documentation being really quite arduous, update your web CV as you go. And for anybody who's watching on the recording, if you're not looking to go this year, but you're looking for a year or two in the future, start now. It's a lot easier if a lot of that stuff is in web CV, because this really is a lot of work. Make sure you collect all your supporting evidence. Keep any letter residents or students send to you that is a nice letter, I guess. If it's a bad letter, forget it, but they probably don't do that. If you are interested and need to discuss, it's great if you get in touch with me or Rick to determine whether we think you're ready for promotion. Write your narrative through the U of T lens, and again, impact. Sometimes finding a mentor who is going sort of in the same pathways you can be helpful. And here's more information. And I would say, you know, we are pretty cautious. When the departmental committee looks at these CVs, we really don't recommend people to go forward unless we're pretty sure that they'll go forward. The ones where we say, no, we don't think so, doesn't mean that we think you're an idiot. Sometimes it means that you're just not quite there, and if we push it and take it to the Decanal committee and it doesn't go through, you're kind of in trouble. Well, trouble. A, you're not getting promoted. You can't retry again for a number of years, and Avram can probably say how many years it is, but it's a number of years if it doesn't go through. And then you probably can't reuse those reviewers again. So we really, if you think, well, oh, they didn't let me go through, we don't want you to end up worse off than you started. And sometimes it's better to wait for a year or two and get some more stuff together and get a little further than to try and push through just because you think that at this point you deserve it. So yeah, we're cautious, but we're trying to do it so that we save you trouble. All right, and here's our contact information. And you know, if anybody wants to discuss their dossier or how to go forward, just please get in touch with us. Are there any questions now before Sharon gives us a talk about her experience?
You were mentioning staff pertinent teaching and what qualifications on those people for teaching.
Well,
Can you repeat the question?
yeah. Vlad asked the important things for each subgroup. Are they important for people who are going through in other areas of focus? If you're going through mainly on CPA and education is less of a focus, you don't have to put quite as much effort perhaps into the education, but still everything supports everything else. So the more you've got, the better it looks. So I would say, yeah, you have to show, remember you're trying to show excellence in one area, at least one area, competence in the other areas. So the other documentation supports your competence in those areas. And it may be that when it gets reviewed, people go, well, you know, that person actually has excellence in more than one area. So it is worth doing the work as much as you can. Yes, so letters from students will help. I mean, you might not want to chase down every single teaching evaluation you ever had, but still it's all supporting everything. So it's not the throwing down the stairs heaviest one wins, but you know, there is something of a truth to that. The more you've got, the better it is.
Because it seems to be the more you file, then it becomes
We yeah, but we still look at everything, so it's not out of the ordinary, I think. And somebody might look at it and think that it has more importance than you think it has. Yes?
I feel one of the things with the promotions and also how we're evaluated that isn't taken into account is as a researcher in a clinical area, you know, you can spend a lot of time trying to get therapy through, and yet there's no way that that's reflected in your evaluation, you know, because like preclinical models, you go for higher preclinical models, you're testing your therapy, and yet there's nowhere, you know, that's evaluated, and yet I feel that that's really what our goal is.
So
to try to get better.
yeah, so the question is, how do you put in things into your dossier that don't fit easily into any of the specific categories?
This person spent a lot of time setting up a preclinical trial. I'm a basic scientist, but all that time, you know, although we're getting it going, it's immunotherapy, it's all very exciting, when it comes to actually showing what you've done, it looks like you've done nothing. And yet I feel that that's probably a big part of what we need to be doing.
I think that would come in under CPA with a cross.
I'm not clinician though.
You can still do that. Why can't that be CPA?
It's not in humans.
I don't know, I would think that still goes in under CPA with a crossover to research though. What do you think, Rick? Yeah, I mean, just because you're a PhD researcher doesn't mean you don't have CPA in education. There's no reason why that doesn't go into CPA. You're guiding how things are going to go forward, hopefully anyway, depending how it works. And you're in charge, or you're heavily involved in a clinical trial. So it's still a clinical trial. Preclinical trial is still a preclinical trial.
So again, there's no microphone, but it's a translational continuum. Okay? So there's a discovery thing, and then there's the clinical implementation, and all that's still in between. So there are ways of packaging it so that an external referee can comment on the importance and impact that that activity has. Okay? So I think that's part of the packaging, which is very important, is that an external, the expert referee can give an informed commentary on it.
Yeah.
And that would go in the CPA section of the whole thing.
Yeah. And I think that question does emphasize that we shouldn't pigeonhole ourselves too much. Because it sounds like on the research side, people are thinking, well, you're only going on research. But a lot of your stuff will have some crossover effect in those situations where you're doing preclinical trials. Yes?
When you say referees from students, how recent do we have the students, graduated a year ago, 2 years ago?
I think a range is probably best. Oh, the question is about asking students for referee letters. How recent should they be? I would think a range showing that you're consistent over years would be best if you can, and maybe different levels.
I think the idea is sustained performance in that domain, and particular emphasis on what's happened since your last promotion. Okay, you can't really, like, if you're going for full professor, it's really hard to say your student 15 years ago, that gave you a good evaluation. Well, that's nice, but they're going to be focusing more on the more recent trajectory that you can have.
Yeah, so again, a range between, just to repeat it so that it's on camera, that a range between your time period of last promotion and current. But I think also, if you can ask for more letters than 3. Like, you could ask them to send you a letter. It won't count quite the same. But if you think there's more students that would be worth hearing from, you can invite other letters from them and then just include it into your dossier as your supporting paperwork. So that would give you more. Avram?
You can apply for promotion the year following you have been rejected. But the Decanal Committee over the past several years, I think has made it pretty clear that we're not interested in people coming to the Decanal Committee to test the waters. So what we want is sure things, and in fact, that's what we get. So once you're down to the Decanal level, and your department has given you a solid endorsement, the likelihood of promotion is probably at least 95%. So that doesn't mean that the Decanal Committee is easy. It just means that you've been really well prepared, and the criteria of excellence has filtered down to the department committees and to the faculty. And in fact, where people, oftentimes are stopped or blocked at the Decanal level is because they're too early. And that sustained piece is just not there. And the committee looks at sustained whatever it may be, even sustained research. But if you fail, you have to be promoted. You can go back the following year. The only thing is, do you have time to make any major changes? The Decanal Committee has no memory, so it won't remember that you came last year and compare last year's to this year.
But something has to be significantly different.
And for the department, there's got to be something that's going to push it over.
It has to make a difference, yeah. Okay, I think for time we need to switch over to Sharon, who's going to speak about how she was successful.
So I'm Sharon. I'm a pathologist in Sunnybrook, and I do breast and gynecological pathology. So most of my examples are going to come from my own world. And I think that Dr. Gottlieb was giving us the space view. So after seeing the big picture from the space station, Kathy took us through like a drone movie, so you saw everything just a little bit above Earth. I'm going to take you to the desk, and now you're coming with me either to the kitchen or to your office, wherever you want to cook your dossier. Sorry. No, it's fine. Got it. Okay, so there is no time that is too early to start and gather information about your promotion process. So whether you are you just started at LMP or you're going to apply next year, probably it's a good time to start and gather as much information about the process. You need to really understand it in order to compile the right documents, to have the supporting documents, and to draft and eventually submit a successful dossier. So if you're planning to claim that you have excellence in CPA, creative professional activity, you need to know, first of all, what it is, and identify maybe 2, maximum 3. I call them epicenters. These are areas of strength, something that you think that you are excellent in. And then identify what was your own contribution towards that. We will talk about each of them in details in a second. Write your CPA section in your cover letter very, very carefully. Show and discuss your material. So make references to your supporting documents all the time, and make reference to your publications and to the impact all the time in your cover letter as well as in the section of the CPA in the dossier. And start thinking, who are going to be your reviewers? So who are people who are outside the U of T that are at least at the same rank as you are, that did not collaborate with you, were never your mentors, and still appreciate your work. So it sounds very trivial, but then when you start to think about those names and you need to give 3 of them, you will find that it's actually very difficult, because most people who are very familiar with your area of strength collaborated with you. So what does it mean, gather information? So I think that it makes a lot of sense to read and reread the promotion handbook on the website. I actually read it when I just started to prepare my dossier, and I reread it several times during my editing and before I filed the dossier. Talk to colleagues, especially people from your own department, so from LMP, who got promoted through a similar process, so through CPA, because this is a little bit vague, and people who went through this process will probably be able to give you some insight. Ask Patricia to come and look at some successful dossier. Actually, looking at the physical dossier is a good idea, because it will show you how to arrange things, how to organize the supporting documents, how to reference to those supporting documents. It's good. Share and brainstorm with a colleague. So get feedback either from your peer, somebody who is going to be promoted on the same cycle. These people are the people who can give you the best feedback, because it's going to be bilateral. You're going to hear them and they're going to hear you. They understand, and they probably also read the manual. They know the game. and they can give you some feedback, because just a colleague is have a limited span of patience towards that. So spend a lot of time and effort writing your CPA section, both on the cover letter and the dossier. You need to be very clear about your topics. So be clear, what is your epicenter? What is your area of strength? How are you going to tie all the activities and contributions that you have accomplished together? So you have the ingredients, you're going to prepare a salad, just show it to us. Lead the reviewer. You need to handhold the reviewer. It's all about the referee, sorry, not reviewer, referee. You need to handhold the referee and the promotion committee and walk them through your story. So you have to establish a narrative and go step by step. This is my area of strength, and this is what I did to claim that, and everything is now going to be tied together. So the first thing is to find your area of strength and brand it. Give it a name, an overarching name where you can tie your activities to. So the activities will come from whatever you did some research on, whether or not you did any educational activity on that end. Try to tie it to service and to quality assurance, for example. So I'm going to widen this circle, but I want to say that this is not two-dimensional as my slide is. It should be probably spiral. So it starts with a cycle, but it goes three-dimensional. So for research, maybe you started with a pilot study, maybe early on in your career. So then you publish several abstracts in national and international conferences. Based on those pilots, you applied for grants. So you got the grant. Then you did something and you wrote a paper and you have a publication on it. Maybe this led to a clinical trial and is now being tested in vivo. Did you give any presentations about it? Lectures, workshops? Did you mentor students towards that goal? How did it impact the service? Is there a new process, a new technique, a new clinic, a new assay that came out of it? And then, did it improve testing? Did it make the laboratory process leaner? Is there a new quality measure that you developed? So all of that is your activity, but now comes the next layer of this spiral. That's the impact and the supporting documents and the metrics. So when it comes to documenting your research, think about the quality of your publications, the citation. Did it lead to more grants? Did it lead to any larger studies? When it comes to education, think about the evaluations, trainees' presentations, thank you letters, follow-up emails. Somebody came to your workshop and 2 months later they sent you an email. So I have this case, it's very difficult. Based on what you said, I think to do A. Do you think that's the right thing to do? Include that email in your supporting documents and make sure that you reference to that to your CPA. And then, did any of that led eventually to change in practice? And can you show the impact, improved turnaround time? Did it decrease the false negative or false positive rate of a test? Did you validate a new technique or a standard assay on a new specimen or something like that? So your contribution should be recognized. So eventually, did you become a reviewer? Are you peer reviewing articles for different journals? Were you invited to join an editorial board? Are you peer reviewing grants? Were you invited to any provincial, national, international committees as a member in an expert panel? And is your opinion and guidance sought by others? So I want to give you an example from my own career and show you how it's kind of tied up to my dossier. So I'm a breast pathologist. So one thing that I do all the time is test for breast biomarkers. And breast biomarkers testing has been one of my epicenters. So exactly as I said, I started my career with some pilot studies on breast biomarkers in invasive and in situ carcinoma. That led to several abstracts which I presented. And then we applied for a grant, and we got some grants to test breast biomarkers, especially in HER2. And we had several publications. I then had several educational activities related to breast biomarkers. On a local level in Sunnybrook, I gave several lectures. On the departmental level, I would say I gave the residents a talk about breast biomarkers. I then had a presentation at UAGen about testing HER2 in breast cancer. And then American College of Pathologists did breast biomarkers course in Canada, and they asked me to join as faculty. So this was more of a national, because it was a Canadian, it was arranged by the Canadian Association of Pathologists with an association to College of American Pathologists. So this is how it goes, and it goes to my service. That this is what I do all the time. I do QA provincially for HER2. I then was approached by CCO to do a systematic review for hormone receptor testing in breast cancer. I did this systematic review as a part of three expert members, and we published our systematic review. This was used by the College of American Pathologists to draft their guideline recommendations for hormone receptor testing in breast cancer. So this was already an international impact. And I think I said all of that already. And then I realized that we need to find a mechanism to standardize the report for breast biomarkers. So I developed a standalone synoptic report for breast biomarkers that was first implemented in Sunnybrook. I then wrote a paper to the Canadian Journal of Pathology and published that, and then was invited by the College of American Pathologists to develop this CAP checklist for the college. So this is an example, and I hope that it showed the spiral and three-dimensional aspect of it. Started at the desk and then evolved into both local, national, and maybe a little bit touching international impact towards what I did. So to summarize, I think that the most important thing is that you came to this workshop, because now you know more about CPA and what you need to do. The other thing, start planning today. It is never too early. Try and brainstorm to identify your epicenter. What is your area of strength? Where are you going to be excellent? And brand it, okay? So package your story. And I think that having a successful dossier is kind of like marketing a gourmet TV dinner. A TV dinner is something that everybody can make, right? So no matter who your referee is going to take this TV dinner, put it in the microwave, and think that it was very tasty, that it's great. So you need to make it ready for the referee to think that it was a great work that you've done. Okay. Seek feedback from colleagues, because people can highlight things that you were ignoring. And think who will appreciate your contribution. So Ingrid Zbnowski, who was the head of the promotion committee at the time when I was applying for promotion, told me, this is not the time to be shy or humble. Speak up for yourself. And my own words on it is, it's true, but keep it believable. So you cannot just say that I'm so famous and I did all these great things if there is no content. So there should be, the content is there and has to be there. You need to have a strong CV to go. But after that, once you identify your areas of excellence and what you really did, just market yourself. This is a marketing exercise. So I don't know if someone has any question. Yes.
That referees are giving information. What exactly is stand for the referees?
Okay. Vlad was asking who gets, or what does the referee get? Is that it? They get everything. They get the whole dossier. Every bit of paper you put in, they get. And to continue Sharon's TV dinner thing, if one area is off to them, it could throw off the whole thing. I think also, continuing what Sharon said about don't be humble, this is the time to put I into your dossier, not the committee did this, we did this, I did this. This is what I did. Okay, so it's not really bragging if you did it. So, you know, it's not that, it really isn't the time to be humble, but you have to put yourself forward. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, I think we've gone well over time, but thanks for coming, and whoever's watching on the webcam, I hope you also got some value out of this. If you have any questions, please contact us, and we'll do the best we can to get you through the whole system.